All right, welcome back. Next, let's talk about how navbars have changed in Bootstrap 4. So let's actually go back and look at a Bootstrap 3 navbar, which I have open here. So this is from Bootstrap 3, and aside from the look, things have changed a little bit in Bootstrap 4 as far as colors, what buttons look like, but also the behavior has changed. So in this Bootstrap 3 navbar, we don't have control over when it collapses. It happens right there. So this breakpoint, technically we do have control, but we have to go into the source files of the CSS and actually alter the breakpoint. We can't use different classes to say, I want this to collapse at medium or small or large. That changes in Bootstrap 4. In Bootstrap 4, we can say collapse at medium or small, although actually what we say is expand at medium, expand at large. But it's the same idea. We're changing where it happens. So for a full list of changes, we'll go back to this trusty document. There's a couple things. So a lot of this has to do with Flexbox, which we haven't talked about yet. But you should know that behind the scenes, it's entirely rewritten in Flexbox with improved support for alignment, responsiveness, and customization. So this is what I just talked about. There is now a new class that is required. Navbar expand, and then the breakpoint where you want the expansion to happen. Do you want it to expand at small or medium or large? So you must put that in there, and you didn't do that in the past with Bootstrap 3. Next, there's no longer a navbar default. It's now called navbar light. And there's still navbar dark, so it's light and dark. It used to be default and dark. And we have to choose one of those. But what's different, in the past, when we did navbar default, that changed the background color and the text color. And if I did navbar inverse, it changes the background to be dark and the text color to be white, or at least light, if not exactly white. They changed that in Bootstrap 4 because they wanted to make it more customizable. So it does require an extra class. You have to manually set the background yourself, but it means that you can create your own colors. You don't have to override as much. So you still have to declare if it's going to be the text is light or dark. So it's navbar light and navbar dark. But then you also have to set a background. So we'll come back to that. A small change, navbar toggle is now called navbar toggler, and it also looks a little bit different. Also, there's no longer automatic margin bottom added to your navbar, so you may need to do that depending on what you're doing. But they have a utility. This is sort of a theme in Bootstrap 4. Anytime there was an inherent margin, not every single instance, but a lot of the time from Bootstrap 3, well, now there are margin utilities. We spent a lot of time talking about them. So you can do that on your own. You can customize the margin. Okay, so let's take a look at the markup in Bootstrap 4. So under components, navbar, where are you? Here we go. And let's just work with this very first one. So I don't want to go over every single class and how everything has changed because, as I've already mentioned at the beginning of this section, most of the time when I'm making a navbar, I am referencing the docs anyway. So it's perfectly fine just to have this open and to even just copy and paste the entire thing and edit it as we need to. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to take this over here and I have a new file, and all that it has, aside from the basic template, as always, is a little text at the top that says navbars, text centered. All right, so I'm going to paste this entire navbar in, and we could do it inside the container, which is going to give us a small navbar that is contained by things. But I'm going to do it outside the container. I could even do it on top of the container to put it in a real spot that you would actually put a navbar. But this is fine for us. So what you'll see right now is that it is collapsed versus the other one from Bootstrap 3 is not collapsed. This one collapses right there, but ours is still collapsed. And that's because of this class at the very top, navbar expand large. So this one, it's required. You have to tell it when to expand. Here I'm saying, or the docs said, expand at large. If I change this, well, first let's just watch as it expands as I hit the large breakpoint. If I change this though, I could say navbar expand at small, and I'll refresh my page, and now it's only going to collapse. Right, it's not very pretty because how much content we have, but now it's only expanding at small. So it's collapsed at extra small, and then everything else, it's fully expanded. So we could, play around with that. I could duplicate this entire thing. You know what? I'm actually going to fast forward a little bit to show you some examples. Okay, so I created 3 new navbars, and each one I just changed the class navbar expand from small to medium to large and extra large. And then I updated the text in the navbar and the brand. So you can see that this one is going to expand first, right there. Then we get to medium, and this second one expands, and then we get to large, and then we finally get to extra large. So we have control over that. The next change that I want to talk about is the color of things. So let's duplicate this one more time. Where do you start? Right here. Just any navbar. We could even do a much simpler one if we wanted to. We can remove a lot of this content. Let's say I remove the form. I don't need that. And I can even remove the entire drop down, which is right here. Okay. So we have this new navbar, and I'm going to change this brand to say navbar dark. So notice that we say navbar light and BG light. So if I change it to navbar dark, all that's going to do is affect the text color. So it makes the text light, because you would want, if you're having a dark navbar, you're going to want light text. So it's sort of the opposite of how you might think it works. This is referring to the overall navbar, even though it's only changing the text color. So then we would change BG light to something like whatever you want. We could do BG dark. That's the easy one. But you could also do BG info, which in the past it wasn't so easy to do. So now we have different color options, and we can also customize it with any color we want just by setting the background ourselves through CSS, not through Bootstrap. So that's new. Again, you have to set the background color, and it doesn't have one by default. So if I don't do BG info, there is no background color. It's transparent, which sometimes you can actually take advantage of that as well. I'm going to show you a project in this section where we have a navbar that looks nice as transparent, but then as you scroll, it actually fills in and becomes a solid color, because transparent navbars are kind of fancy and trendy these days. Okay, so we're going to set that back to info. And those are pretty much the main changes that I'm going to talk about. So once we learn about Flexbox, you'll also be able to move things around inside these navbars using Flex utilities, position them. How do you spread out the different links or the pieces of information in here? But as far as the markup itself, it has changed. But again, I didn't want to go over every single class and say, oh, this shifted to this, and this class name is this. It's much easier just to look at the docs and copy it. But the big changes, you have to give it a background color now yourself. And we have to specify, which is a nice thing, but we have to specify where it's supposed to expand. We didn't have control of that in the past. Other than that, the looks have changed, right? It's a little nicer in my opinion, but it's still similar. Okay, moving on.